Good morning, Summer and Jordan. I am right here on the corner of Division and Lawrence Street, just a few feet away from where the deadly shooting actually took place. And so far, we are just learning that one person has died overnight and the other person is still in the hospital. At this time, one person has been detained for questioning, but this shooting happened just around 2 a.m. this morning, where our officers arrived on scene to find two victims inside of a car suffering from gunshot wounds.
What if I told you that on February 26, 2025, a father made a phone call to 911, not because he needed help, but because he was about to destroy his own family at exactly 2 a.m., while most of Mishawaka, Indiana was fast asleep? Tyreese Brown Sr. did something that would haunt investigators for months. He picked up his phone, dialed emergency services, and then grabbed a semi-automatic handgun from his closet. But here's what'll mess with your head. He wasn't calling for protection. He was calling to get cops to his house faster, because he knew what he was about to do. 22-year-old Aisha Phillips had no idea she was living her final moments. She was at what should have been a safe space, a family birthday party on Division Street, the kind of neighborhood where, according to locals, nothing bad ever happens. The kind of place where you'd expect laughter, cake, and maybe some family drama over who gets the last slice of pizza. Instead, Aisha found herself caught in the crossfire of a father-son argument that was about to turn deadly. Tyreese Brown, 23 years old, probably thought the worst thing that could happen that night was an awkward conversation with his dad. He had no clue that his own father, the man who raised him, who was supposed to protect him, was about to hunt him down like prey. But here's where this story gets really twisted. When that argument started heating up, when voices got raised and tempers flared, Tyreese didn't just lose control. He made a choice. He walked to his closet, grabbed his weapon, made that 911 call, and then followed his son and Aisha outside to finish what he started. Joshua Chips was up late playing video games when he heard something that would change his perspective on his quiet neighborhood forever. Ten gunshots. 4 shots, then a pause that probably felt like an eternity, then 6 more. He watched a car speed down his street, not knowing he'd just witnessed the aftermath of a father's betrayal. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever been at a family gathering where you felt genuine fear? Because what happened next proves that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who's supposed to love you most. By the time police arrived 5 minutes later, Aisha Phillips was dead from a single gunshot to the chest, Tyreese Brown was fighting for his life with 3 bullet wounds, and Tyreese Brown Sr. was hiding behind a house like the coward he'd become. But the question that'll keep you up tonight is this: what could possibly drive a father to call 911 and then execute his own son's girlfriend? Let's talk about the 3 people whose lives collided on Division Street that night, because understanding who they were makes this tragedy even more devastating. Aisha Phillips was just 22 years old and pregnant. Think about that for a second. 22. She was barely out of college age, probably still figuring out her life, her career, her future. What we know about Aisha paints the picture of a young woman who was serious about her relationship with Tyreese. Serious enough to be invited to family gatherings. Serious enough to be sitting at that birthday party, probably thinking she was building relationships with her boyfriend's family. She was living in or frequently visiting Mishawaka, which means she'd made this place part of her world. This wasn't some casual hookup or brief fling. Aisha was integrated into Tyreese's life, into his family circle. She trusted these people enough to be vulnerable around them, to let her guard down at what should have been a celebration. Now let's talk about Tyreese Brown, 23 years old. This guy was about to learn the hardest lesson anyone can learn, that blood doesn't always mean safety. Tyreese was the son, the bridge between Aisha and the Brown family. He brought his girlfriend to his family's party, probably proud to have her there. maybe even thinking about a future together. But Tyreese had no idea he was walking into a nightmare. He had no clue that his own father saw him as a target, not a son. When that argument started, Tyreese probably thought it was just typical family drama. Maybe they'd had disagreements before, maybe his dad had a temper. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what was coming. And then there's the man who turned a birthday party into a crime scene. Tyreese Brown Sr., 45 years old. This is the guy who should have been the protector, the patriarch, the one keeping everyone safe. Instead, he became the predator. Tyreese wasn't some stranger who broke into their lives. He wasn't a random criminal or a home invader. He was family. He was the host of this party. This was his house, his celebration, his gun, his choice to destroy everything. What kind of man keeps a semi-automatic handgun in his closet and then uses it on his own son? What kind of father looks at his child's girlfriend and decides she needs to die? These aren't heat-of-the-moment decisions when you're making 911 calls first. The relationship dynamics here are what make this case so disturbing. This wasn't gang violence or a robbery gone wrong. This was a family dinner that turned into an execution. Asia trusted Tyreese because he was her boyfriend's father. Tyreese trusted him because, well, that's his dad. Pause the video and tell me, do you think family members are more dangerous than strangers? Because statistically, you're more likely to be hurt by someone you know than someone you don't. But here's what nobody at that party knew. Tyreese Brown Sr. was about to prove that the most dangerous person in any room might be the one sitting at the head of the table. The birthday celebration was about to become a funeral, and none of them saw it coming. Nobody knows what triggered it. That's the terrifying part about this whole thing. Somewhere between the birthday cake and family small talk, something shifted. Something dark. Something that would turn a father into a killer. Court documents tell us that Tyreese Brown Sr. and his son Tyreese started arguing during the party, but they don't tell us why. Was it about money? About Asia? About some old family grudge that had been festering for years? We may never know what lit that fuse, but what happened next is documented in chilling detail. The argument wasn't just getting heated, it was escalating fast. And here's where Tyreese made a choice that separates him from every other angry parent who's ever had words with their kid. Instead of walking away, instead of cooling down, instead of being the adult in the room, he walked to his closet. Think about that moment. He had to physically leave the argument, go to another room, open his closet door, and grab a semi-automatic handgun. That's not a split-second decision. That's not losing control. That's making a conscious choice to arm yourself against your own family. But wait, it gets worse. Before Tyreese fired a single shot, before he even confronted his son with that weapon, he did something that proves this wasn't about rage or losing control. He called 911. Not after the shooting, not during some panic, before. He picked up his phone and called emergency services, allegedly to get police to the scene quicker. Let that sink in. This man was planning his violence. He was thinking ahead, strategizing, making sure law enforcement would be there to witness whatever he was about to do. That's not the behavior of someone who snapped. That's the behavior of someone who wanted an audience for his destruction. Meanwhile, Tyreese and Asia had no idea what was coming. They probably thought the argument was over when Tyreese walked away. Maybe they were relieved. Maybe they were planning to leave early to avoid more drama. Maybe Asia was asking, Tyreese, if his dad was always like this? They had no clue that the man who'd just left the room was coming back, armed and ready to kill. When Tyreese returned with that gun, the dynamic changed instantly. This wasn't a family argument anymore. This was a hostage situation. Tyreese and Asia did what any rational people would do. They tried to get out. They headed for the door, probably thinking they could escape, maybe drive away and let things cool down. But Naros wasn't done. He followed them outside, weapon in hand, continuing the argument that had now become a hunt. Joshua Chips was 3 houses down, controller in his hands, completely absorbed in his video game when the night exploded. First, he heard 4 gunshots, sharp, loud, unmistakable. Then, silence. A pause that probably lasted seconds but felt like forever. Then, 6 more shots. Chips dropped his controller and ran to his window. He saw a car speeding down Division Street, probably someone fleeing the scene, maybe someone trying to get help, maybe just someone trying to survive. What Chips didn't know was that he'd just heard the sound of a family being destroyed. Those 10 shots weren't random violence or gang activity. They were a father executing his son's girlfriend and trying to kill his own child. The silver Chevrolet Impala that Asia and Tyreese had tried to escape in became their tomb. By the time those shots stopped ringing out, Asia Phillips was dying from a single gunshot wound to her chest, and Tyreese Brown was bleeding from 3 bullet wounds, wondering how his own father had become his attempted murderer. 5 minutes later, when police sirens started wailing down Division Street, it was already too late for Asia. But for Tyreese, those 5 minutes meant the difference between life and death. The birthday party was over. The nightmare had just begun. At 2:00 a.m. on February 26, 2025, Mishawaka police got a call that would haunt them forever. Shots fired. People screaming. Division Street had just become a war zone. But here's what makes this case absolutely bone-chilling. By the time that 911 call came in from neighbors, Gnarls Brown Sr. had already made his own call to emergency services. He'd already grabbed his gun. He'd already decided that his son and Asia Phillips needed to die. When officers raced down Division Street with sirens blaring, they had no idea they were responding to a father's betrayal. They thought they were dealing with typical street violence, maybe a robbery, maybe gang activity. Instead, they found something that would shake even seasoned cops to their core. The silver Chevrolet Impala sat on Division Street like a metal coffin. Inside, 2 young people were bleeding out, victims of the man who was supposed to protect at least one of them. Asia Phillips was slumped in that car, a single gunshot wound to her chest stealing her last breath. 22 years old, and her life was over because she'd trusted the wrong family. She'd come to a birthday party and ended up in a morgue. The medical examiner would later confirm what everyone already knew. She died at the scene. No hospital run, no fighting chance, no last words. Just gone. But Tyreese Brown was still fighting. 3 bullet wounds, blood everywhere, but somehow still alive. His own father had pumped 3 rounds into him, and he was still breathing. Think about the strength it takes to survive that kind of betrayal. Not just the physical trauma, but the psychological destruction of knowing your dad tried to execute you. The paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Tyreese, knowing that every second counted. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, where surgeons would spend hours trying to undo the damage his father had inflicted. 3 bullets, 3 separate wounds. 3 attempts by Gnarls Brown Sr. to end his own son's life. While medical teams fought to save Tyreese, police were hunting for the shooter. They didn't have to look far. Gnarls Brown Sr. wasn't running. He wasn't speeding away in some getaway car. He wasn't trying to flee the state or disappear into the night. They found him hiding behind a house near the scene, like a coward who just realized what he'd done. When detectives brought him in for questioning, Gnarls didn't lawyer up. He didn't claim self-defense. He didn't make excuses or try to spin some story about how this was all a misunderstanding. He confessed. According to court documents, Gnarls Brown Sr. told investigators exactly what he'd done. "I fired at my son first, then turned toward Asia Phillips and shot her." Read that again. "I fired at my son first." His own child was target number 1. Then he turned his weapon on a 22-year-old woman who'd done nothing except date his son and show up to a family party. The confession reveals the cold calculation behind this violence. Gnarls didn't just lose control and start shooting randomly. He had a sequence, a plan. Son first, girlfriend second, maximum family destruction in minimum time. But here's what really messes with your head. Gnarls had called 911 before any of this happened. He'd made that call knowing he was about to commit murder. He wanted police there quickly, but not to stop him. Maybe he wanted witnesses. Maybe he wanted to control the narrative. Maybe he wanted to make sure someone found the bodies fast. Whatever his reasoning, that 911 call proves this wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated execution disguised as family drama. Joshua Chip, still processing what he'd witnessed, told reporters something that should chill everyone. It's a peaceful neighborhood. Lately, for the past few years, it's actually been pretty peaceful, and everything like there hasn't been really any bad situations.
Saying ambulance, and I ended up seeing them bring out bodies from the house to come around starting, but lately for the past few years, it's actually been pretty peaceful and everything. Like, there hasn't been really any bad changes. I hope it becomes a better place for the children of the next generation. That's all I can say.
That's the thing about family violence. It happens in peaceful neighborhoods. It happens at birthday parties. It happens when you least expect it from the people you trust most. Real talk. If you were Tyreese, could you ever forgive your father? Hit the comments and let me know where you draw the line, because this story is about to get even more twisted. By the time the sun came up on February 27th, Asia Phillips was dead, Tyreese Brown was fighting for his life in surgery, and Gnarls Brown Sr. was sitting in a jail cell, probably wondering how a birthday party had turned him into a double shooter. But the worst part? This was just the beginning of the legal nightmare that would follow. The St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office didn't waste time. They hit Gnarls with charges that could put him away for the rest of his natural life. Murder of Asia Phillips, attempted murder of Tyreese Brown, and, here's the kicker, firearm enhancement charges, which basically means they're throwing the book at him for using a gun to destroy his own family. Do the math on those charges. If convicted on everything, Gnarls Brown Sr. is looking at up to 125 years in prison. That's not just a life sentence. That's multiple lifetimes. That's the justice system saying, you don't get to come back from this. But let's talk about what the investigation actually uncovered, because the details are what separate this from your typical family dispute gone wrong. First, there's that 911 call. Court documents confirm that Gnarls called emergency services before he started shooting. Not during, not after, before. That single phone call destroys any argument about this being a heat-of-the-moment crime. You don't call police and then commit murder unless you're planning something specific. The witness statements paint a picture that's even more disturbing. People at that birthday party watched a normal family argument transform into something deadly. They saw Gnarls leave the room, probably thinking he was cooling off, only to return armed and dangerous. Then there's the pursuit angle. This wasn't a shooting that happened in the heat of an argument. When Tyreese and Asia tried to escape, when they headed outside probably thinking they could drive away and let things settle down, Gnarls followed them. He hunted them down like they were prey instead of family. The weapon itself tells a story. A semi-automatic handgun stored in his closet, easily accessible. This wasn't some random gun he found lying around. This was his weapon in his house at his party. He knew exactly where it was and exactly how to use it. But here's what really seals the deal. Gnarls' own words to investigators. He didn't just admit to the shooting, he gave them a play-by-play. I fired at my son first, then turned toward Asia Phillips and shot her. That's not the statement of someone who lost control. That's the confession of someone who executed a plan. The autopsy, scheduled for February 27th in Kalamazoo, would confirm what everyone already knew. Asia Phillips died from that single gunshot wound to her chest. One bullet, perfectly placed, instantly fatal. Meanwhile, Tyreese survived 3 gunshot wounds and surgery, proving that sometimes survival is just a matter of inches and luck. The crime scene investigation backed up everything Gnarls confessed to. The silver Chevrolet Impala told the story of 2 people trying to escape and failing. The blood evidence, the bullet trajectories, the witness statements, everything lined up with a father who decided his son and his son's girlfriend needed to die. Police made sure to tell the community this was an isolated incident, that there was no ongoing threat. But how do you tell a neighborhood that the threat was never some outside danger? It was coming from inside one of their own homes. The formal charges came down fast and hard. Murder, attempted murder, firearm enhancement. Each charge carrying decades of potential prison time, each one representing a life destroyed by Gnarls Brown Sr.'s choices. His initial court appearance was scheduled for March 6, 2025 at 8:30 a.m. That's when this case would officially enter the justice system, when lawyers would start arguing about whether a father who confessed to shooting his son and killing his son's girlfriend deserves any mercy at all. But here's the question that investigators couldn't answer, the one that would haunt this case forever. What could possibly drive a 45-year-old father to make that 911 call, grab that gun, and destroy his own family at a birthday party? Some answers, it turns out, are more terrifying than the questions themselves. Here's what nobody wants to talk about. The people most likely to hurt you aren't strangers lurking in dark alleys. They're sitting at your dinner table. Asia Phillips learned this the hardest way possible. She trusted Gnarls Brown Sr. because he was her boyfriend's father. She felt safe at that birthday party because it was family. That trust killed her. The National Domestic Violence Hotline confirms what this case proves. Escalation happens fast, and it happens most often within families. Arguments become threats, threats become weapons, weapons become funerals. But there's something uniquely twisted about this case. Most domestic violence involves partners or spouses. This was a father targeting his son's girlfriend, someone outside the immediate family who got caught in crossfire she never saw coming. The presence of that semi-automatic handgun turned what could have been a shouting match into a double shooting. Without that weapon, maybe Gnarls throws some punches, maybe someone calls the cops, maybe everyone goes home angry but alive. Instead, Asia Phillips is dead. Tyreese Brown is traumatized forever, and an entire community is asking the same question. If you can't trust family, who can you trust? Sometimes the monster isn't hiding under the bed, it's hosting the birthday party. March 6th, 2025, 8:30 a.m. That's when Gnarls Brown Sr. would face a judge for the first time since destroying his family. Sitting in that courtroom, he'd no longer be a father or a party host. He'd be defendant, facing 125 years behind bars. But what about the survivor? Tyreese Brown underwent surgery and survived. But imagine living with that reality. Your own father tried to execute you. 3 bullets meant for your heart, and somehow you're still breathing. How do you process that level of betrayal? How do you trust anyone ever again? Asia Phillips' family got a phone call no parent should ever receive. Their 22-year-old daughter was dead because she went to her boyfriend's birthday party. She trusted the wrong family, and it cost her everything. Division Street returned to its peaceful reputation, but Joshua Chips and other neighbors know the truth now. Evil doesn't announce itself with warning signs. It shows up at birthday parties with cake and presents and semi-automatic handguns. The legal system will decide Gnarls' fate, but some questions will never get answers. What triggered that argument? What made a father become a killer? Sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones who raised you. If this case shook you to your core, if it made you question everyone sitting around your family table, then you're starting to understand the real horror of true crime. It's not the stranger in the mask. It's the person passing you the mashed potatoes. But here's what'll really keep you up tonight. Gnarls Brown Sr. isn't unique. Right now, in quiet neighborhoods just like Division Street, there are fathers, mothers, siblings, and relatives who are one argument away from becoming killers. The only difference is, we don't know their names yet. Asia Phillips thought she was safe because it was family. Tyreese Brown thought his father would protect him, not hunt him down with a semi-automatic handgun. They were both wrong, and that mistake cost one of them everything. The scariest part about this case isn't the violence. It's how normal everything seemed until it wasn't. A birthday party, a family argument, a father who kept a gun in his closet. All perfectly ordinary things that became the ingredients for murder. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now because these stories matter. They show us the darkness that can hide behind the most ordinary faces, in the most peaceful neighborhoods, at the most innocent gatherings. Drop a comment and tell me what's the most disturbing family secret you've ever discovered. Sometimes, the person tucking you in at night is the same person planning your funeral. Sweet dreams.